Good afternoon, everyone. Hi. A few people just coming in, so we'll get underway. Come on in. My name is Maura O'Shea. I am the executive director here at the Thomas Cole National Historic Site. I'm so happy to see all of you this afternoon. Thank you for joining us, and thank you to all of our members. Many members are here with us this afternoon. You make these programs possible, and you give life to this great organization, and we are so grateful for your support. I can't think of a better person to kind of wrap up this year of celebrating Thomas Cole's first visit here to the Catskills than Jonathan Palmer, who is just an extraordinary friend to the site and a great colleague. You know that he is a writer, a historian, and he's from Athens, lives currently in Coxsackie. He's a graduate of Siena College and the University of Albany, where he holds a master's in information sciences. And he was employed for 6 years as the archivist in charge of the Greene County Historical Society's Veteran Research Library, and has served as the archivist for the County of Ulster since 2023. And he continues to hold an appointment as the 5th Greene County historian. So having Jonathan here as the Raymond Beecher lecturer today is really poignant. You may also know that, where is she? Jonathan is married to our fabulous Director of Engagement, Heather Palmer, who was here a minute ago.
She's staffing the house right now.
She's staffing the house right now. And together with her fabulous team of colleagues, Meg DiStefano, Beth Nguyen, Jessica Goon, our incredible fellows. I just saw Maya Junkins here and Peyton Maslin. They put together just an extraordinary roster of programs this past year, all various types, and I really want to congratulate all of you on your incredible work, and thank you so very much. So now it's a great pleasure to introduce Jonathan Palmer. Thank you.
I guess I'm giving the talk today. Thank you so much for the introduction. Just a shout out to Maura as well. You know, this has been really exciting here at the Cole House with a changing of the guard, as it were. And you know, I'm up here speaking as the Greene County historian, following the footsteps of Raymond Beecher, which is of course an impossible task to do for many of us who knew Ray well. And it's very special for me to be able to kind of follow in that legacy and celebrate history with you today through this Beecher lecture. Likewise, Maura has followed in the footsteps of Betsy Jack's impossible task and somehow managed to bring out a really amazing program here for the Cole Bicentennial, which this lecture caps off. Now they say saving the best for last. You'll be the judge of that after the talk's over, of course. But thank you all so much for braving the weather today. Lots of familiar faces here, and this is a real treat. So on that, in the shadow of the mountains, you've all seen this one before, I think. So this is, when you think of 1825, just somebody call it out. When you hear 1825, what do you think right away?
Erie Canal.
Erie Canal. Oh, this is great. Okay, I'm surrounded by history buffs. Every time the word Erie Canal gets mentioned from here on in, you just shake your fists, shout, boo, hiss, because we'll talk about that in a little bit. But you know, the Erie Canal. You think of the idea of what that is. You think of the promise it represents. This surreal major project. The state government gets involved with creating this infrastructure that redefines the trajectory of the history of the state of New York right into the present day. You know, you think of it as a time of promise. You think of it as a time of change, and you know, so we're looking at this date because it's the 200th anniversary of Cole's arrival here in the Catskills, and you have to think of this young man he's 24 at the time, shows up here in the mountains, and he's a student of the place, first off. Every artist is a student. They bring their eyes to a place, and they see it, and they experience it, and then they render it. And there's so much of those trappings of promise and potential that are seeded through all of these paintings that he creates at that early date. And I love Lake with Dead Trees because there's all this promise and potential, and there's all this selective omission as well. So we're talking about the era of the Indian removals. We're talking about the era of the development of the Catskill Mountain House, the expansion of the Erie Canal. And here, Lake with Dead Trees, is Thomas Cole saying, here's this idyllic wilderness landscape. Here's this place that is untouched. This is a place that represents all of the elements of romantic thought as we're beginning to understand it in the young United States. And what he omits is that just out of frame to the left, about 100 yards, is a five-star hotel. And so today's talk, what I really want to harp on through this is these ideas of change, these ideas of this potential, and just what a heady and exciting place Catskill is for this young guy showing up here in 1825. Because we don't think of Catskill as at the forefront, unfortunately, these days. I know I lived here for a little while. I don't think of Catskill as at the forefront. I think of it as the place, cursed by the story of Rip Van Winkle. It's a little sleepy Dutch town. And it's anything but at that time. And we still have veins of that old legacy still hiding in there that we can tease out. So, to that end, this is the rubric for today. This is how you're going to grade me on whether or not I covered everything I was supposed to. So we've got the themes we'll cover is Catskill is the crossroads of the Hudson Valley. Catskill is a landscape of industry. We really don't think of it as that anymore. We think of it as the gateway to the mountains, but it's a seat of heavy industry too. A transforming society, because the United States basically turns 14 while Cole's up here, and the whole country is just kind of being turned on its head. We've got it by its ankles, shaking for its pocket change. The United States is changing. It's changing in painful ways. It's changing in rapid ways, and it's changing in some really positive ways too. And of course, the dawn of the Catskills, because before this date, if somebody talked about the Catskills, they were talking about a place to extract wealth from. They were talking about a place where you'd go to cut down some trees. And after 1825, we're talking about the Catskills as something that is becoming integral spiritually to our identity as Americans. So, crossroads of the Hudson Valley. I'm about to commit the most gross oversimplification you have ever seen in a historical lecture. We're all ready for this? Okay, you are here. Behold, that's Catskill, New York. After the Revolutionary War, everybody here who's heard me lecture before has heard me give this little rundown. I should have it on a tape recorder just so I can play it. But when you're ready, after the American Revolution, there's all of these old New England families in Connecticut and Massachusetts, and they all have 10 sons, and the father is sitting down writing his will at night, saying, oh, the 200-acre farm goes to... And it says to the other 9 sons, well, you're going to have to go west and seek your fortune. And so they do go west. They go all the way to the east shores of the Hudson River in old Dutch New York. And they look across, and there's all these Dutchmen with their beards looking across from the other side, kind of scowling. Nobody speaks the same languages. Nobody goes to the same churches. They all have different customs for even basics on how they conduct business. It's a very, very exciting time, the 1770s, 80s, and 90s. So you've got all these people who are moving west, and we've got this thing in the way, that green blob, which is the Catskills. I have Bob Titus here, the Catskill geologist, who can attest to that being a very accurate map of the Catskills right there. Yeah, it's perfect. So, but there's something else in the way too. So we've got the mountains, and we've got all these people moving west, and they're going to hit the mountains, and they're going to say, well, I don't want to walk all the way over those. And there's no reason to either, because there's something else in the way. We've got this. This is another gross oversimplification. Who's heard of the Hardenberg patent? This huge, several million acre tract of land stretching down to the Pennsylvania border that's awarded to a bunch of residents of Ulster County and their silent partners in like 1707. And in 1707, they get all this land. They don't even know where the western boundary of it is, but it's essentially all of the Catskills going out into Delaware County, all the way down to the Pennsylvania border. Nobody knows whose land is where or how much there actually is, so they get involved in litigation, and they get involved in litigation for like a century. So there's all these people coming west who are looking for land. They're looking for places to homestead and farm, and they're not going to be stopping in the Hardenberg patent necessarily because nobody knows whose land is what and where, and whether or not they'll be able to get a claim to it. So they're skipping it. They're going out to this much easier, more fertile land out in western New York. So as you get out into like Chenango County, Tompkins County, all of these lands that are awarded to soldiers for service in the Revolutionary War, and their families are going out there in the 18 teens, lots of arable land, really beneficial for cash crop agriculture on a large scale. And so Catskill, to get in on the action, builds a turnpike road. So right from Catskill, skirting over the north end, again into Schoharie County, and then down into the Susquehanna, they built the Susquehanna Turnpike, which funnels everybody coming from Connecticut and Massachusetts. They're arriving on the east bank of the Hudson, kind of in like the Hudson Greenport area. And they're taking the ferry over to Catskill, and they're getting on a turnpike road that begins at the bottom of Main Street. And I forget the exact statistics, but it's something like 100,000 people over the course of the first like 2 decades of its operation that are traveling this road westward alone, not even just counting the people who are using it commercially to move goods back and forth. It's a major improved thoroughfare, and it's one of the only thoroughfares that people can get their wagons over at the beginning of the 18th or 19th century to get out into these western lands in New York. So Catskill is ideally situated. We all got that? I didn't see anybody taking notes. Any questions about that? Yeah.
I have a quick question. Do you know exactly what streets aside from Main Street the Susquehanna Turnpike was?
Yeah, think about it. Yeah, think about it as this. So you're starting down in Lower Main Street. There's no Catskill Point at that time. This is there's a Catskill Point very soon after, but there's no Catskill Point right at the beginning. So they're getting onto the turnpike down at the end of Lower Main Street, kind of near where Main and Greene meet. And they're following more or less like 23B out through Leeds to where it meets, like starting with like the 32 and 145 corridor, and more or less following 145 out through Durham, and then up over the north end of the mountains, skirting Windham out into Conesville. And that's the old turnpike road. I know, even if you drive it today, you're like, I need to be a horse dragging a wagon along on this, but it's a lot better than trying to go up Corderskill Clove. So, all of that's going on, and at the same time, there's a bunch of people down in the city of New York who, the burgeoning metropolis of the United States, it's growing rapidly, changing rapidly. There's needs for all of the basics being shipped to New York, but there's also a population of people who are, students of the young republic, this growing place, this experiment in democracy, who are looking at the country itself, and they're coming north. So they're coming up from the city. So you've got all these things that are these confluences at Catskill. They're arriving at Catskill. This is one of my all-time favorite graphics. This is the frontispiece of the New York Magazine of September 1797. It is a sketch of the town of Catskill on Hudson's River. And this is kind of, the sketch is done from like where Creekside Restaurant is, looking across the creek towards like Lower Main Street. That little building up on the hill at the very far left is the old academy. You're looking out towards the mouth of Catskill Creek. It's a very weird angle, but you couldn't actually see Catskill at that time from the river itself. It was hidden by the bridge. The caption that goes along with this little engraving at the beginning of this issue of the New York Magazine. The New York Magazine is read by the upper crust of New York society at that time, like the Livingstons are subscribers to it. These are the people who are the movers and shakers of the state of New York, and ergo movers and shakers of the nation itself, who are digesting the content in this magazine. And if you can read all of this, kudos to you, but the long and short of it is that the first section is a summary of the attributes of the village of Catskill. It's being rapidly settled by an industrious set of people. which I don't know what that means. And then the end piece says, the mountains in this vicinity, known by the name of the Catskill Mountains, make a majestic appearance, and it is said, furnish many things for the gratification of the curious. And that's a really cool, weird little inclusion in 1797. That's strange. This is, we're looking at almost 30 years before Cole shows up here, and we've got people saying that the mountains are kind of neat. They furnish many things for the gratification of the curious. That's how I'm going to phrase that from now on. So, oh, please, no. I don't want to lose anybody during my lecture. I haven't lost anybody in at least 3 weeks, so we're good. But so this magazine is going out to this audience of people who are the movers and shakers of the young nation. Now, who's heard of J.B. Church Esquire? Boy, I finally got the history buffs. I stumped them. Who's heard of Alexander Hamilton? Okay, that's better. Brother-in-law. So this is a map showing, a map showing the relative situation of a tract of land belonging to J.B. Church Esquire of 1804. This is a real estate advertisement. And that weird little tiny square, here I'll pull up a detail of it. The weird little tiny square at the far left is his tract of land that J.B. Church owns out in western New York. And he's illustrating, this big map illustrates the context of his land in relation to all of the major population centers of the northeastern United States at that time. So we've got this huge map showing, we're going down into Delaware, Maryland, all the way over to, Vermont. Huge swath of land. And he's saying, this piece of land here, look at how ideally situated it is. Never mind that it's hundreds of miles out in the woods. He's trying to sell it. But when he illustrates the Hudson Valley, he shows, going north from New York City, you've got New York City down at the bottom here, you're going up the river, and you see these little roads spurring off, and way up at the top on the right is Albany and Troy. In the middle, though, between New York and Albany, he shows Newburgh, Poughkeepsie, and Catskill as the principal towns along the river. And I just think that's fascinating. 1804, one of the principal communities. He skips over Hudson, he skips over Kingston. You've got Newburgh, Poughkeepsie, and Catskill are the places where people are going if they want to get west. And he's got a proposed state road, from Catskill, which is this weird, long-standing internal improvements debate that Catskill grapples with for 25 years. They're trying to get a state highway put in to replace the Susquehanna Turnpike. But, anyway. All of this is being bolstered by revolutions in transportation as well. So we've got people who want to get to Catskill, and we've got a network of roads, waterways. We've got the ready capital to invest in this infrastructure that's developing these ways to quickly get people from point A to point B. More importantly, get goods from point A to point B. That's what everybody's worried about. These are advertisements that I just kind of cherry-picked from the 1825 edition of Catskill Recorder. And so we've got, an advertisement for a stagecoach line, down at the far end there. And really, think of it, it's a stagecoach line. It's like Pony Express. They've got way stations, they change the horses, get people up and down the valley in a day and a half. Pretty rapid travel for that time. They're using the old post roads and things like that. We've got sloops that are running from Catskill. There's several sloop companies that are transporting goods and people using this vernacular design of seagoing vessel that's developed here in the Hudson Valley during the 18th century. And then we've got this crazy thing that Robert Fulton does in 1807. He goes to Robert Livingston and says, hey man, what if we take one of these boats and we light it on fire? And Robert Livingston says, yeah, I'll give you money for that. And we would develop a steamboat, the first commercially viable steamboats here, traveling on the Hudson River. This is the first time in history that humanity is traveling faster than the wind could blow them or a horse could carry them. First time ever. Think about that. Think about that insane idea that we've suddenly liberated ourselves from biological and ecological constraints with how far and how fast we can travel. This is something seismic. So there's all of these things going on to conspire to make Catskill a busy place. The landscape of industry. So who's taken a tour of the coal house? Oh, that's amazing. Look at all those hands. I love that. So when you visit the coal house and you get immersed in his story, what you're hearing about is the story of a man who, much like Thoreau, who is like our go-to 19th century, he'd be smashing the computer over his desk and things like that. He says, oh, I hate this, I hate the train, go out to the woods. We think of coal in those terms, and I think that's a really apt thread to draw between these two guys and these ideas. Coal in his way, he becomes the ideological keystone of what becomes the Hudson River School. He's not just a practitioner of it, he lays the foundations for what the ideology of the art form is in and of itself. And it's an art form that grapples with the idea of industry at the same time that it benefits from the ready capital that industry generates for is clients. You can't sell a painting unless somebody's got the money to buy it. And it's real interesting when it's a railroad man or a steamboat man who buys that painting, or a tanner. So, to that end, I had to put this piece up. I love this sketch. This is, I'm playing real fast and loose with the timeline now. This is a sketch of the old Kierstead Tannery done by B.B.G. Stone in 1857. This sketchbook probably sat for a year in the precursor to this building, the original new studio, when Benjamin Stone was working on site here in 1857, renting from Mariah Cole. And Stone, much like Cole, he comes to the Catskills for the first time and he just gets lost in it. And it's such an interesting thing because when Cole comes to the Catskills in 1825, he goes up Cotterskill Clove, he goes to see the Falls of Cotterskill, and the old Kierstead Tannery in this picture is the cornerstone business of a small village called East Hunter Village. There's an actual settlement in Cotterskill Clove at that time, all centered around this heavy industry. There's guys up on the sides of the mountains chopping down all of the hemlock trees, peeling the bark, bringing it down to this reeking pit of, a tannery operation. I mean, the thing stunk. You could probably smell it down in Malinville, when it was in operation, just depending on the wind. They're absolutely foul. They're bringing hides from South America up to the Hudson Valley. They're tanning them to make shoe leather and things like that. And then they're shipping all of this stuff back down to New York City. And it's a cabal of businessmen operating out of a place in New York called the Swamp, who are regulating the prices on leather goods and who are the investors in these leather industries. And the Catskills are prime for this. Tanning becomes one of the centerpiece forest industries in the first half of the 19th century. It is huge. It is beyond huge. It is region defining. It is a major employer, and you have to think that for a young artist traveling to this place, think about the mental gymnastics you're going to have to make to omit that from your consciousness as you're sketching these places. He would have been at Cotterskill Falls smelling the tannery running. When he goes to Cotterskill Falls, there's already the remnants of construction up there. There's already a dam on that creek and things like that. There's lots going on. You can all read this, right? Yeah. So this is just, I just wanted to pull this up too. This is a map, this is a fragmentary piece of a map from the New York State Archives of Catskill in 1797. Again, I'm playing fast and loose with the timeline. I just showed you 1857, and now I'm showing you 1797. This is to get you to understand, we've got these bookend pieces here that show you that, they exist before, they exist after. This is just the east end of the town of Catskill. The village is right in the middle there along the creek. And you'll have to take my word for it, but everywhere one of those snaking little yellow roads crosses over one of those blue lines, there's like 1 or 2 mills at each of those spots. So in 1797, you just show up in Catskill, and there's heavy industry. Every place that's suitable that has a head of water with a natural falls on it, you're going to see people constructing mills. And they're making everything. They're fulling mills, they're plaster mills, they're powder mills, they're grist mills. You have them using water power very soon into the 1820s for textile manufacturing. It's a busy, busy place. So, This is from Spafford's Gazetteer, published in 1824. This is on page 90. The post village of Catskill. Post village means a place where the mail is delivered. Think about that too. Like this is like, you have to name that a village is a place where the mail is going to get delivered. Mouth of this creek makes a fine harbor for sloops, contains 250 houses and stores, county buildings, an academy, an Episcopal and Presbyterian church, two banks, and this is a very new idea at this time. You know, in Catskill, 15 years before this, you would have had to have gone to private individuals to seek your loans and your ready capital to put things together. By the 1820s in Catskill, we have two banks in operation that are these for-profit ventures of these guys saying, we need to have something that we can use to continue fostering the development of industry and business here. So they're creating these local banks. Three turnpikes at the center in the village as well. So these are, Catskill is a place that's connected to the north and south, it's connected to the east and west, and then it's also connected with this weird little thing that goes off to Hunter for a little while, but we'll skip that for now. So it's a going concern. So when Cole decides to come here, it's not like he says, well, I need to go to the edge of civilization and find the American wilderness for myself. He says, oh, I can hop on a steamboat and just ride up to this place with a dock and get off, and I can ride up the mountain on a stagecoach, and I can go to that lake where they just put that hotel up, and I can do my paintings right there. You know, there's a lot of decisions that he makes on his part to create this idea of the wilderness, but at the same time, he's also benefiting from the infrastructure and the hype that's made this place someplace where somebody would even want to get off and get onto the dock and walk into town. Is that clear to everybody? Am I conveying that? Good. So, just a sample. Again, this is the recorder from 1825. So I just excerpted some more columns of advertisements. We've got on the far left the Catskill Air Furnace, which I think is the building where the bookhouse is now. The events venue at Foreland, right next to Willa's. So that's the old air and cupola furnace. And at that time, it's being run by a guy named Thomas B. Cook, who is he's like the marathon runner of local industry. He's involved with the Canada-Johari and Catskill Railway later on. You kind of see his hand in every little project that kind of gets off the ground in Catskill. He's an investor, and I think some of his kids are friends with the Thompsons, who are the people who are living here when Cole comes to Catskill. So we've also got two advertisements. We've got at the Delaware Leather Factory in Lexington, we've got advertisements, we need beamsmen, which I'm in the tanning industry, I have no idea what a beamsman is, but you have to understand that the tannery itself being a mill, you not only need the manual labor, you need mechanics, you need people who know how to integrate the simple machines, the steam engines, the stationary motors and things like that are going to be powering some of these facilities. You need somebody who knows how to cut gears so they can work in time. You need a place where you can go to get the job castings done to make the durable metal products. And on the far right here, we've got to notice all the tanners in Greene County who are operating at that time, getting together as a collaborative, cooperative venture to create a Tanners Association in Greene County in 1825. And you've got William Edwards of the New York Tannery, Foster Morse, Red Falls, Ezra Pratt, Ira Day, Tobias Brett, D.B. Winston, but you've got Zadok Pratt, and you've got Palin and Reed, who are, Palinville and Coxsackie, and Thomas E. Barker, who I think is Carroll. So it's all across the county you've got all this going on. Think about that landscape, and these people are all interconnected and they understand one another. In the 1830s, when the Canada-Johari and Catskill Railway is being developed, a survey describes the general nature of deforestation along the route of the proposed road going from Catskill to Canada-Johari. A 70-mile stretch kind of going broadly northwest. And they say there are only about 4 miles of heavily timbered forest along the entire length, as surveyed by those guys in 1835. Think about that. 4 miles of heavily forested land along that 70-mile route. Think about how many axes have been swinging at that point for 30 years. All through the valley of the Catskill Creek, up in the mountains themselves. This is a ravaged place. It is a place that has drastically changed from what it was in the 1780s and 90s when those New Englanders are first coming over to the banks of the Hudson to look at those silly Dutchmen. It's something going on. So, and the last one I had to include, stone cutting, right down in the middle there. I don't know if anybody can actually read that, but my favorite part of this advertisement, so, you see in the papers early on, 20 years before coal shows up, a lot of these newspapers are advertising basics. They're advertising land. They're advertising horses that will, cover for stud fees for people who are developing farms and things like that. You see people advertising bulk raw materials. And then by the time coal is here in 1825, you see these stores that are advertising the Catskill Recorder. They're advertising finished products, they're advertising fineries, they're advertising things that are accessories that aren't necessary to the essentials of life. And that stone cutting one is my favorite, because here's Sherman Bassett in 1825 advertising that you can go. What?
Boo Hiss.
Boo Hiss, Sherman Bassett.
1825.
Yeah. Oh. Whoa, did I miss something? I'm sorry.
You told us to say boo hiss when you said 1825.
Erie Canal. Save it, we'll get to it. Anybody else have rotten fruit while we're at it? So again, the stone cutting there, though, this is an accessory. This is something that isn't necessary. When you go up into the mountains into an old cemetery, people use flagstones. They scratch initials into the stone. This is a guy who's a trained stone cutter who's making artistic gravestones that are something people are going to spend extra cash on if they want to spruce up the new burial plot in the new cemetery that's just been laid out right here in the middle of the village. And if you want one of those tombstones, you just have to go to William Van Bergen, who's the owner of the Greene County Hotel down on Main Street. Just go to him and say, hey man, I need a tombstone. So you go to the local hotel, which is also one of the main bars in town, and you order your gravestones. So that one just got me. That was really funny. A few more, oh God, more words. A few more advertisements here. I just wanted to give you a sense of what these advertisements look like. And this doesn't do it justice. I wish I could put a newspaper from 1825 in front of everybody's faces right now, because these things are just packed. It's like 7 columns across these little narrow strips of nothing but text and advertisements. The front page is generally serialized stories, agricultural tidbits. Second page is national news bleeding into local news if you didn't get it at the tavern already. And the third page and fourth page are almost exclusively advertisements like this. And they're advertising everything, and it's coming from all over. They're advertising salt from the West Indies. They're advertising, locally made beers. They're advertising all these fancy goods. I love up in the corner, new fashions. Miss Pike has just returned from New York City with the latest in ladies' fineries and things like that. This is a departure from the pioneer paper of the 1790s that we would have been looking at. And my top one on here, P.B. Pratt, which is also the guy, I think it's Philo B. Pratt, and he was also the guy you go to get your lottery tickets. And here he is running his bookstore saying he has this day received a large assortment of children's books suitable for New Year's presents. Many of them are entirely new. I don't know what that means. And of a character calculated to give general satisfaction. Boy, that's what every present should be, calculated to give general satisfaction. But so you've got it all here. They're advertising children's books. This is a place that's established, that has a sense of itself, that has a middle class that's going to pick up these newspapers, look at these things and say, oh, I want that stuff that isn't essential to me surviving the winter. These things that I can just get so I can have my 4th set of clothes, my 5th set of clothes, things like that. And of course, salted and peppered in there are these advertisements that jump out at me as being the ones that Cole would have said, oh, that's really interesting. So I picked out 3 of them that I think are really interesting and telling for us as historians. When we look back and we think on a young artist coming to a place like Catskill, we think, where's he just sourcing the basics and things like that? So we've got places that are going to be sourcing like the sketchbooks and things like that. We've got bookstores and things. But here's Matthew Dies from Alone. On the far left there, and he's advertising all the variety of different paints and dye effects that he sells in his shop. I mean, this is basically a chemistry experiment, the stuff this guy's offering. I mean, you can buy Prussian blue there, just don't eat it. So there's all of these products that you can get locally that are going to be these cornerstone elements of of the artist's trade in and of itself. Not just like a guy who's painting wagons, a guy who's painting canvases is going to need some of this stuff. You've got this middle advertisement, fresh groceries at Coit and Tappan's store. And then just below that it says the Catskill Mountain. And this guy, William Cowan, has also erected a stand at the falls near the Pine Orchard for the purpose of accommodating ladies and gentlemen who visit the falls and wish to favor him with their patronage. So you go to Cartersville Falls. This advertisement is from 1824, so a year before Cole gets here. You can already go to Cartersville Falls and there's a refreshment stand. How amazing is that? Yeah, yeah. And the last one, of course, this is Erastus Beach. This is his advertisement for his livery stables in Catskill and his stagecoach line that just services the recreational area around Pine Orchard. So this is a guy who's in the transportation business locally. He's one of those guys who's running those stagecoaches, but he's also got a special service in the summer just for the people who are trying to get up to this new Catskill Mountain house that's just been built. We'll get into the weeds on that in a little bit. So, a transforming society. Now, this is the important part, you know, when we get into the 1820s. This is the thing you've got to walk away knowing about the 1820s, is just how drastic the transformations are. So, I'll just pull up these bullet points here. We've got the Age of Jackson that I'll talk about. We've got gradual emancipation, which is its own, like, 5-part series of lectures. And we've got time and space, people's relationship to these things. You know, there's the idea that time and space and our relationship to the way we interact with time and space in general is changing in a really drastic way. The idea that we can make the most out of time that we're using to get from point A to point B, what that leaves us as far as leisure time, what that leaves us as far as how far we can travel to recreate. You know, all of that is transforming this time. So, here we go. These are 2 bookend pieces here. The first one, this is the banner from the local news from the reporter from September of 1824. And if you look just below the politicking part, the little finger arrow saying, you know, Republicans are solicited to attend, yada yada. You see, reception of General Lafayette. So, year before Cole shows up is when the Marquis de Lafayette kicks off his big national tour of the United States. And this is a big deal. Why is it a big deal? Why is it a big deal? Yeah, he's a revolutionary hero, but not just a revolutionary hero. He's the last. He's it. He's it. You know, this is a seismic moment for the United States. This is people who are practicing politics in the mid-1820s. This is at the end of something called the era of good feeling. If you can believe there was a moment in American politics that was called that, there really was. There's a lot of Monroe's presidencies. The era of good feeling is this thing after the War of 1812, where there's a one-party system for a period of time. And that all comes crashing down in 1824 when, who is it? William Crawford, Henry Clay, John Quincy Adams, and Andrew Jackson all run for the presidency. What party is Jackson running on? Does somebody know?
Democratic Republican.
Democratic Republican Party. What's Cowan running on? What's not Cowan? What's Crawford? Yeah, what's Crawford running on? Do you know his party line? Democratic Republican. Do you know what John Quincy Adams is running on? His platform? You know what his party affiliation is? Yeah, you're starting to pick up a theme here. So 4 guys, 1 political party, they're all running for office, and the decision is defaulted to Congress on who finally wins the election. It is a mess. It is a knockdown, drag-out fight, and it is also this remarkable performance of the durability of the democratic experiment in front of one of the surviving people who helped to form the country in the 1770s. So Marquis de Lafayette, he comes back to the United States, and he wants to see this country 50 years after it was founded. He wants to see the young republic that he helped form. And he's traveling around, and supposedly he's in the room when Adams and Jackson shake hands after the decision comes down about who had won the presidential election. And this is a man who had lived through the turmoil of the French Revolution when political disagreements like that are decided at the guillotine rather than at the table. And so it's a remarkable moment for us to perform the success of American democracy, but it's also a foreshadowing of the chaos that's going to ensue, because all of a sudden you have this first generation of statesmen who are coming to office who are not framers of the nation itself. They aren't people who are the original architects of what American democracy is. They are just like us. They are people looking at the Constitution saying, well, I know what he meant when he wrote that. You don't have any idea what you're talking about. Does that sound familiar? That's 1824. So right before Cole shows up, and Cole arrives, and everything's coming apart at the seams. It's chaos. It is change, and while Cole is here, Lafayette is still touring the United States. He's traveling around, he's getting the sights, he's getting the smells, and people are galvanized by this thing. They see Lafayette there, and they see him as a symbol of what they're inheriting. They see him as a hero that they want to emulate. And so, this serves to congeal our sense of self politically and socially, but it also entrenches people. And it primes us for the chaos of the later 1820s and 1830s. So it's a mess. So we've got Lafayette on one side. Remember, we're talking about that first column. And on the other side here, we've got, this is well after Cole has established himself in Catskill. This is 1840. This is a Greene County mass meeting. And that engraving there is done by an artist in Hudson. And it shows William Henry Harrison's log cabin in the woods, the everyman running for president on the Whig ticket. Because finally, at the end of the 1830s, American politics has congealed into a new two-party system of the Jacksonian Democrats and the Whig Party that would later become the Republicans of Lincoln. So it's a really fascinating thing. This Greene County mass meeting, does anybody know where this mass meeting was held? Here, on Cedar Grove. So John Alexander Thompson, who is Uncle Sandy of Thomas Cole's writings, opens up the grounds, opens up the family orchards, and has this huge Whig political rally in September of 1840 here on the grounds here. So you think for Cole, he's arriving at this time when we're looking back to the Revolution, and he's living here at a time when we're looking forward to what the fate of the nation is going to be, and we're having these huge political rallies here on the campus. It's unbelievable to think about. Who knows a little bit about gradual emancipation in New York? When I say gradual emancipation, you know what I'm talking about. So, yeah, we're talking about the end of slavery in New York State, because New York is a slave state. On the left, I've got a page from the Coxsackie Record of Freeborn Slaves, which is an unbelievable oxymoron to commit to pen and ink. There's not a lot of these that still survive, but every town in New York that kept one of these. Starting in 1799, the gradual abolition law is passed. It goes through a couple revisions, but more or less outlines the way in which slavery would end in a very painful and slow way in New York. And it's pitting people against ideologies, it's pitting them against the development of new economic systems. And it's at the same time grappling with the idea that we have a bunch of people who had previously been subjugated and disenfranchised who are now going to be exerting political agency if we let them. And that, for some people, is a very scary prospect. It's a really fraught prospect. And it syncs up perfectly with the idea of what we're talking about when we talk about this democratic experiment and who's a participant in it and who's not. So the record of freeborn slaves is kept right up through 1825. So when Cole is here, slavery in New York doesn't end until 1827. And it only ends in 1827 because we figure the genie is out of the bottle, more or less. Laws are passed saying that people born after 1799 would be voluntarily indentured for a set period of time, and it's messy. Just how can you free some people and say other people are going to exist in bondage the rest of their lives? And how can you say that somebody's children can have personhood that's recognized in the eyes of the law while their parents remain chattel property? It's a messy, messy moment. And I love when you look at this time and you look at the practice of the individuals who are grappling with this thing. The document on the right here, this is Thomas T. Thompson of Catskill, County of Greene, State of New York. Do hereby certify that I have manumitted, and by this certificate do manumit and free from slavery, my Negro slave named Josephus, aged about 24 years, given under my hand this day, so on and so forth. And that day is it's Christmas Day, 1818, emmanuates Josephus. Thomas T. Thompson is the man who builds the house here. He's the one who builds Cedar Grove. His brother is John Alexander Thompson, who is like Thomas Cole's uncle-in-law when he's living here with Mariah after they're married. And this man Josephus is a man who's enslaved on this campus. And here we have somebody, and every time I look at this, I think, which three ghosts visited Thomas T. Thompson in the night to get him to wake up on Christmas Day and make this decision? In the background, alongside this, there's of course, the subtext of him suffering from a permanent debilitating illness that's eventually going to kill him. And you have to, there's so many questions that get wrapped up in this, the sincerity of it, what he saw as his relationship with Josephus after manumission, all of these questions that arise and boil out of these things that I don't have time in a day to tease all of these out. But if I don't have time in a day to grapple with this one document, imagine here in Catskill, where there's an enslaved population at one time after the Revolutionary War, 1790, 1 in every 5 people you encounter on the street would have been an enslaved person. And it's all their children, it's all their grandchildren, things like that we're talking about who are alive here during Cole's time, who are for the first time ever, a lot of them, discovering their own agency. They're people in the eyes of the law for the first time ever. These are seismic shifts that are happening. African-American men after 1821 are enfranchised if they have a certain amount of property. And that distinction is granted at the same time that the property restrictions are removed for all white men. So there's all of these weird little grapplings that are happening. I love this advertisement. This is the advertisement for the barbershop of Martin Cross, who would have been the local barber in town when Cole was here. A young guy who visits for the first time. If you're traveling and you want to stay spiffed up, who knows, maybe he walked into Martin Cross's barbershop. And Martin Cross is a freeborn African-American man who becomes one of the integral movers and shakers of the local abolitionist movement in Catskill, and a mover and shaker of the local black community here following emancipation in 1827. He's a correspondent for William Lloyd Garrison's newspaper, The Liberator. He marries a free woman of color up in a free community in Upper Canada made out of self-emancipated enslaved people. He's a really, really fascinating guy. He's just one of these weird little overlap figures that we have where we can look at Cole and look at him walking down the street, and in the moment those two make eye contact as he's walking down the street, we have all this confluence, all of these vying ideas of what the young republic is and what it's going to be. So I look at that advertisement and I'm like, wow, and here's this guy, Martin Cross, who's moving in all these circles. He's advertising in a newspaper that's read by a predominantly white audience. All the other advertisers in it, I don't think there's another African-American advertiser in the recorder that year. So that's unbelievable to think about. And this is this guy who's moving between these spheres, moving these circles. And he really has his finger on the pulse, too. Boy, how's that? Did I really bring down the mood here, too? But no, I do want you all, you should be walking away from this remembering that when Cole arrives here in 1825, he arrives in the Catskills in the slave state of New York. That's a wild thing to think about. That we look at this figure who to us feels so contemporary. We look at his art and it feels so contemporary. And to think that he's here, at a time when some of the coachmen would have been enslaved men. That it's just on a day-to-day basis the people you're interacting with. Now, I already talked a little bit about, steamboats and how crazy it is that we decided to, how's this for a 180 pivot? A little bit about steamboats and why they're so pivotal and instrumental is change. Because, for the first time ever again, humanity can travel faster than the limitations of the wind and their physical bodies. And that's really important. But in 1825, when Cole arrives here, the Livingston monopoly on steam transportation on the Hudson River had just been lifted. So for the first time ever, we're getting into a free market with steamboat travel, which means that steamboats are becoming more economical to travel on. There's more of them to pick from, and they're competing with one another to outsell and get more passengers on board their respective steamboat lines. So the prices are going down. So for a young guy in his 20s who's a starving artist, all of a sudden the price of a steamboat ticket has dropped. And that's a real great incentive to take a steamboat and ride it up to Catskill, get off on the dock there and say, boy, I'm going to go see the mountains. I've heard about them for years. It's time to check it out. Now, as slavery is ending in New York, slavery is it's an economic tool, first and foremost. It starts as an economic tool, but what it becomes is a social tool. It's a tool to stratify your society. It's a tool to create class system and structure, and it's a tool to subjugate. But as slavery is ending in New York, what you find with the creation of these agricultural societies that are led by people, Anthony Van Bergen, a former enslaver, who owns a huge farm up in New Baltimore, Coxsackie area. And he's one of these people who's a mover and shaker behind the creation of an agricultural society, which is replete with all of these people who are developing time-saving mechanisms and innovations that make the work of the farmer more efficient. And these are of primary concern, that we no longer have a source of free labor and you have to pay your labor, you want it to be efficiently conducted. So coal is showing up here at a time of really unbelievable innovation in the agricultural sphere as well. So we're changing the ways, we're changing how productive our crops are in our fields, we're changing how quickly we can get things processed. We're specializing our farms in ways we've never specialized in before, and farmers have opportunities to move fresh produce further than they ever had before because of this infrastructure. So think of the Catskill Mountain House, for example. If you go all the way up to Haines Falls, you go up to North and South Lake, and you go to that 5-star hotel, and all that food way up there on top of the mountain in the middle of nowhere is fresh. It's because of all the confluence of all these things that are making it possible to get all this stuff to this place in a timely way. Now, I'm running the clock along here, and I swear we're going to wrap this up soon, so bear with me for a minute, because I just hit the Erie Canal. And so the Erie Canal opens in 1825, and remember I showed you that little hook of that turnpike, and how everybody was taking that turnpike to go up and around the Catskills out into the Susquehanna. The Erie Canal opens, and overnight nobody wants to take the turnpike. They want to hop on a boat and ride it out west. And they don't want to put a wagon load of their produce on the road to go back to Catskill anymore. They want to put it on a canal boat and send it to Albany and then down to New York without all of this freighting that's required to move this produce between vessels and prime movers and things like that. So Catskill goes berserk. We lose our minds. So there's a notice saying, oh my God, the Erie Canal is opened. We're going to make a canal to connect with it. So coal is showing up here, and everybody's running around to the town meetings at night saying, oh, we got to go to the meeting about how we're going to figure out how to build a canal out along the 145 corridor to go out to Canajoharie, and then we can bring all that freight back down to Catskill that nobody's bringing anymore because the canal opened. It goes so far as to produce a really weird publication in the 1830s called the Society for the Improvement of Catskill. It's a little circular, it's hardbound, that has this awful map in it. So right is north, south is left, and west is up. So it's just oriented weird, but what it shows is these proposed railroads and canals that are going to intersect with the Erie Canal and bypass Albany on the Hudson River, so you don't have to bring all your stuff to Albany anymore, you just bring it down to Catskill again, just like the good old days of the 18-teens. Now, you can see here some of the makings of the chaos of that time, because we've got this one advertisement from February 17th, 1825 saying we're going to build a canal. Over 10 years later, they're still saying the same thing, and now just producing fancier maps to show the idea. So it never really takes off. And that's fine, because something else has happened. And this is where we get into it. This is where we wrap it up. This is the chicken or the egg debate. So in 1822, Edwin Croswell, the editor for the Catskill Recorder, puts an editorial into the newspaper, and the first paragraph of it reads, American scenery, among the more powerful and durable of the moral associations are those connected with local scenery and the objects of one's home and country. They hold a second rank, if not an equal one, in the affections with those of kindred and family, and they bear equally a share in creating and reviving the purest of homeborn feelings. They are indeed the strong and beautiful ligaments which bind the hearts of men to one another. How various are their gradations from the simple parlor and garden to a whole country outspread and multiplied to an almost infinity of objects. That's the editor of the local paper writing that. And he's saying, geez, everybody, we've got tanneries, we're cutting down all the trees, we've got foundries, we've got turnpikes being built, farmers making pastures. But has anybody taken a step back and said, boy, this is a beautiful place? And that's 1822. Later that same year, the document on the left is an invitation to a rural ball. It reads, "You are requested to attend a ball at the Pine Orchard on the Catskill Mountains on the evening of Wednesday, the 18th of September. And the people who are inviting, in this case Henry Ashley, who's a local tanner, are James Powers, Apollo's cook, who are both lawyers for some of the great landlords of the Hardenberg patent, John Adams, another lawyer, John A. Thompson, gentleman farmer of Cedar Grove. I don't know who the other guys are. Edmund Croswell is the newspaper editor. And then you've got guys from Columbia, Ulster, and Dutchess as well signing on to this. And these guys are senators, they're bankers, they're movers and shakers and captains of industry. And they're saying, we're going to get together and have this little party. And what they end up doing is building the Mountain House. They create the Catskill Mountain Association. They put up this hotel, slap it down on the side of the mountain. And this is a bill for the postmaster of Athens, Castle Sealy, his stay at the Mountain House in 1824, the year the Mountain House was built. And so when Cole arrives, he shows up to Catskill, and this is what he sees at the top of Pine Orchard. There's this unbelievable, strange-looking federal palace slapped onto the precipice of the mountain. And it's a building that's already been infused with these ideas, thanks to writers like Washington Irving and James Fenimore Cooper. It's a place that's vested with the idea that it is already one of the most beautiful spots in the young United States. It is a place where you can see all creation. William Cullen Bryant describes it as a place where you go up there and you hear nothing but the sound of the mountain torrents flowing and the cry of the eagle in the hills above and the trees. It's a really, really majestic, beautiful place. And Cole arrives here, and he's getting immersed in that. And it's very convenient that it happens to be his primary clients are going to be the people who are staying in residence. And I'll cap it off with this. So this is Cartersville Falls. So this is one of the two paintings. We started the talk with Lake with Dead Trees, which is one of those two initial paintings that are these really important works that Cole brings back to New York and exhibits and sets the world on fire with. This is Cartersville Falls. And Cole does this exceedingly conventional thing, and he paints exactly what he sees. How many of us have been to Cartersville Falls and seen exactly this scene? Yeah, I mean, I can count the number of days I've seen this exact thing. It's absolutely stunning, and in it combines it's the confluence of the picturesque and sublime. It's all the hallmarks of American Romanticism, and when we look at it, we have to question, okay, is it this that creates the climate by which the Catskills become what they become, or are the Catskills already becoming that thing, and Cole is the number one spokesman of it? And I don't think there's actually a good answer ultimately, because local businessmen can do whatever they want. If they never tap into a national audience, it's another thing. And an artist can paint whatever they want, but if they aren't tapped into the undercurrents that define the society, you're never going to arrive at a masterwork like this. And so to that end, we'll wrap and I'll take questions. So thank you all for sitting through this. That was like 55 minutes on the dot. So I really said, this is my first time giving this version of this talk, so you're all guinea pigs in that sense. I'm sorry, but you're not missing anything outside if that's a consolation. Yes?
What's a freeborn slave?
A freeborn slave. So what is a freeborn slave? A freeborn slave is a young person who is born to an enslaved mother. That record never concerns itself with who the fathers are. And that child, born to that enslaved mother, would become involuntarily indentured to the enslaver of that child's mother for, in the case of women, a period of like 21 years, and in the case of men, a period of 25 years.
So previous.
Yeah, free, you know, an involuntary indentureship is just slavery with a stop date. Yeah, so other questions, concerns, rotten fruit, yes.
Do you know the year that the elevator started from
Oh, the
Catskill?
Otis, yeah, that's,
The train
yeah.
elevator?
yeah. So, yeah, it's unbelievable. So the Catskill Mountain houses started and everybody says, oh, this is beautiful. Look, you can come and stay in the wilderness. And then by the 1880s, everybody's like, well, wouldn't it be nice if a train went there? I mean, awful idea. I mean, it's like shooting yourself in the foot. But they build the Catskill Mountain Railway in 1881, 82, it's in operation. And the Otis Elevating Railway is 1892, 93. When it's put into operation. So decades after this. If Thomas Cole had seen it, he would have just not included it in the painting, which is what he does at the time. So, yeah.
There was a lecture you gave earlier, I saw on YouTube, and you posted looked like a cartoon from a New York journal or magazine. It's a drawing of all of these people who are coming up here to be artists.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes. That's Thomas Nast. That's
I wonder if you
1866.
could speak to that idea of the idea of people coming up to draw and paint.
Yeah.
They weren't people like Thomas Cole or Frederick Church. They weren't of that talent, but they were just doing it.
Well, I mean,
Maybe they were.
yeah.
A
You
lot
know,
of
they
them
might
were,
just
yeah.
not have had the market. You know, I'm thinking of Sarah Cole right now.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, so Thomas Nast, right after the Civil War, he does this series, a trip to the Catskills, and it's for Harper's, I think, and he puts all these sketches in it, which are kind of satirical, tongue-in-cheek commentary on these people visiting the mountains. It's also one of the only renditions we have of a person of color working at the mountain house, a porter. He draws an African-American porter unloading baggage at the mountain house, which I think is fascinating. He has this one scene, and it's Catskill Clove, and it's just salted and peppered with all these little people with their parasols and canvases painting away. What Cole touches off, and what like Frederick Church is representative of, is like the ultimate practitioner of something Cole starts. There's this whole second and third generation Hudson River School artists who end up going and producing artwork for really diverse markets. And the Hudson River School of Landscape Art, of course, informs the development of, you know, photographic markets for things like stereo views and things like that of the Catskills, of these famous scenes. So, you know, think of him as like letting the genie out of the bottle, and then every artist who's practicing graphic art, you know, at that time is going up here to make renditions. Benjamin Stone, the guy whose sketch I showed at the Kirsten Tannery, only is ever successful as an artist producing for engraving. He never creates a great canvas in oils. He's only ever producing things that are mass-produced chromolithographs and engravings and things like that. And there's a whole bunch of artists in that vein. And their correspondence about one another is really, really brutal sometimes. So, yeah. How's that? Any other questions?
Your study of newspaper ads in the 1820s is an interesting approach to history, and I think a good one.
Thank
Go a century forward and look at the Catskill newspapers of the 1920s, where there are a lot of engravings of
Yes.
people, ladies wearing girly fashions and men's hats, which are spectacular. You'll find the Catskill that is far more affluent.
You know, it's funny because, like, you think like the media of that time. It's like, yeah, Catskill in the 1920s looks very affluent. We have a vaudeville theater. We have lots of heavy industry. A very important middle class, but like, you know, the media. Like, the thing I was trying to show with those advertisements is that the trappings of that are all there. The people who are making the fine ball gowns have all the source material they need in 1825 too. But you know, the way everything changes, the more it stays the same. You know, which I think is something that I drew. But you're right. You know, I mean, there's a Catskill that's on this trajectory too, and it's because of that resort industry. By the end of World War I, we've crested. You know, not that we're on the downslope, but you know.
It's a different slope.
Yeah. All right. I think this is it. We'll wrap.
Well,
really,
I would say, join us in the Cole Center to continue the conversation and have some refreshments. And thank you, Jonathan.